In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the role of the U.S. on a global scale. But first, I want to ask people to consider becoming a patron at my Patreon page at patreon.com/challengehistory. Levels go between $1 and $100 for the minimums, and the donations are greatly appreciated, and it would really help out me for any type of income that you could give, because it goes to help out this channel as well as me to earn income, because as I am on disability and I'm not at the level yet that I can actually earn ad revenue for my channel. And once I reach that ad revenue for my channel with it, that will add another stream of revenue for me that I can live off of. So anything you could actually donate would be greatly appreciated. And at the $50 and $100 levels, once I reach a level of basically about 5 people each with it, I will put a yearly giveaway for a gold coin for the $50 level from the Roman Empire, and a Byzantine for the $50 level is going to be a silver Roman coin, and the $100 level is going to be a gold Byzantine coin for each of those levels for the people who for win. Is going to be a yearly giveaway, and as each more people add up with it, it will start to add up the number of people who can the number of giveaways that I hope to start doing. Because I want to make it worthwhile for people to start giving at those higher levels. But I want at least a minimum of 5 before I start doing that, because I need to make sure that I can actually afford it. I don't just want to basically be breaking even on that, because I'm not actually earning an income. But on to this basic point with it. What we're going to do is, obviously, first with it, we're going to understand the idea of what the role is. We obviously know from the congressional level is it's Congress's role to declare war, and it's the role is mainly supposed to be where we're supposed to have diplomacy. Now, basically, what we look for here with it is we're only using this for Thomas Jefferson's quote right here. That's the only purpose of this article right here from 2010, is where Thomas Jefferson remarked, "Peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none." Entangling alliances is basically an actual what an alliance is. An alliance is basically an ally. This means we're going to have 0 allies. Now you might go, oh, but we're allied with NATO, we're allied with Israel, we're allied with Saudi Arabia, we're allied with the UAE. What are we going to do? Well, that means we have to cut those things off. And even George Washington basically felt to stay away from the affairs of Europe as well. And he recommended the ties to be commercial and not political at all, which meant to stay the hell away from them. Now, if we start to look at where we go over to military with it, because you're going to say, oh, but if we leave and we start to not be allies with them, what are these countries going to do for their military? Well, we go up to the idea of we look at their actual budgets, and we're going to see right here the 15 highest budgets, and we see that they're not spending $0 on their military. Turkey itself is spending 18.2, Canada is spending 20.6, Australia 27.5, Italy at 29.5, Brazil at 29.3, South Korea at 39.2, Germany at 44.3, Japan at 45.4, United Kingdom at 47.2, France at 57.8, India at 63.9, Russia at 66.3, Saudi Arabia at 69.4, 228 billion for China, and the U.S. is way out of whack at 610 billion. And this was way back in, what year was this from? This is from Business Insider. This would be from, because I know ours is higher. This is at May 2nd of 2018. We've since gotten higher levels. Where our last one was over $700 billion, and since then, Trump has actually, on this newest one, has wanted even a higher raise to our military budget. I mean, we have global military spending at about this is at this point about $1.7 trillion. That was for 2017. It was already up 1.1% from the previous year. So if we're talking about something, countries are spending their money on it. So this means this would make us go to the idea of some of the ideas of Ayn Rand and what she deems as selfish, what basically a lot of people tend to term as being being going after self-interest. And the self-interest would even apply for nations themselves. And it would basically be going off this idea of the self-interest. They're not going to essentially drop the idea of a self-interest and say we're not going to spend any money on defense and let another country take us over just because another country decided to change its foreign policy. We're going to basically give in. And that's not going to be the case. They're going to adjust accordingly, regardless of what goes on. And this is what's going to happen. And when we start to look at this, you're going to see that that's the case. And when we start to look at these points, now we need to discuss what do we really need to be defending ourselves as an actual military if we decide that we're not going to have all of these entangling alliances. Well, we start to look at what we have here. This is 228 billion right there. We pretty much round up to the next mid amount, which would be about 250 billion and easily be safe. This means with even from this amount, you're talking what is that, about $360 billion short of what we were spending then. This is for the 2017 year, about $360 billion less, and that you could just save right there. Now, basically, what you're doing, the way you're doing this is you're getting out of NATO. You're telling, and for people that are worried about getting out of NATO, what would happen is even the European Union has floated the idea of establishing a European Union military to deal and eliminating NATO themselves, because they feel that it's not working for them as an actual system, and they feel that the additional countries in NATO is not exactly functional because it's making them cover more than actually is reasonable. And they would actually make it to be the most functional thing for Europe, for what they believe for their own defense. And that means the United States does not have to cover for them either. And it makes it the best for both worlds, and it makes us being able to split off on our own, because really we have no actual function for common defense for them. They have their own common defense for Europe, which would make a lot of sense because the landmass is very, very similar, and they would, and a lot of these countries could come together for a common defense purpose. Now, the United States has no legitimate purpose because none of these countries have come together for when the United States has been attacked. They tend to be very, very skeptical when it comes down to it. So that would reduce a lot of money there. Another point is where we're spending a lot of our budget money actually happens to be for putting money into such countries as Saudi Arabia, and they're not showing it on here, but actually Israel as well. Israel's actually another one that actually has quite a bit of money put into it, but a lot of that money, they would actually have a high budget, but their budget actually is, the bulk of it is actually paid by the United States. And that's why they're not actually listed on here, because of that fact. Is the almost every penny is paid by the United States military. And it's because if you look at their system, they have actually kind of a unique system of socialism. And what it boils down to is we pay virtually 100% of their of a lot of their programs, along with other Western nations, and they do this through lobbying. And when people go, oh, you can't complain about AIPAC, well, and complain that it's anti-Semitic, well, the fact is we're just reporting on, we just go after what are facts, and that's why they do not show up on this list. And that's solely the reason why, and it's because of what they're doing. They have plenty of military power. They actually have just as much, if not more, than Saudi Arabia. But what happens is their actual military expenditures are coming out of the United States. They're coming out of other budgets from other countries, and they're kind of nickel and diming from other countries as well. Such as like they'll get a little bit from countries like France. They'll get a little bit from the United Kingdom. They'll get a little bit from things like Germany. They'll get more from countries out in Europe, even Australia and Canada. Are some of their money's going to them, but it's not direct. They're not directly coming from their actual military budgets. These are usually they usually separate out their budget, so it looks different. In the U.S., they put it into their military budget alone, making the military budget highly bloated. Now we go up to the way what's causing a lot of our military problems is we start to look at our the reason why Iran wants to build up a military presence is that you start to look at all these bases around Pakistan, Afghanistan, and over here in UAE, Oman, and over here in Iraq, over even up in Turkey. And you start looking around the whole area, and you'll see basically is in here in Saudi Arabia, and you start to see all of these bases, and you'll start to see that basically their whole countries with Iran and then their ally Syria are basically surrounded by, and then even in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan as well, Kyrgyzstan, and you see all these countries basically surrounding Iran as well as Syria, and you'll see and then Lebanon as well, and then you'll see that basically that they're just covering them. So basically there's so many bases that are basically just surrounding your country. When you start counting these up, it's basically you'll see how many bases are surrounding them, and you can see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 18, 19. I mean, they have basically over like 40 bases surrounding Iran, and basically they have at least not including what Israel has with it for its bases, but basically is you're talking there's like nearly 10 bases surrounding Syria. And when you're talking about this, this is something that's very, very threatening to a country or a couple of countries. And that's very, very, and that's basically, you're pretty much threatening war. And now we go to where we're in the world is, this is just from August 2015, and this is from Politico, and these are from what we have, and we still had at that point 800 military bases in more than 70 countries abroad. Now, basically, we're talking that and they try to compare that in comparison, Britain, France, and Russia, by contrast, have about 30 foreign bases combined. This should give you kind of an idea. When you start to work that out by actual math, is like, we're talking like that's about 25 times the number of bases combined. And that's basically for those three countries combined. And it's number one, it's a massive cost with it, as they note, and it's this was even including a lot of the closing of the bases in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we've known that since this point is from that point they've actually reopened up a lot of those. So we know that that's kind of gone right back up. Now we go to the point of now this brings us to the point of what is actually our goal as a country. We get back to the actual point of this thing with it. If you look at what our founders stated, they wanted peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. This means that's not any of that. That's not peace. You sure as hell are not promoting peace with that. That has nothing to do with commerce. That has nothing to do with honest friendship. Because you're definitely provoking certain nations, and you definitely have entangling alliances with quite a few of them because of this. Now, what we need to do is remove these bases. Basically, you should have bases in only one country. That country should be the United States. You don't need any bases in any other countries, because as we've discussed, there's going to be self-interest in those other countries defending themselves. Now we go to the idea of what diplomacy is. This is where we get to the idea of where it says peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations. This is for the part of diplomacy. And this is when we go to the idea from Britannica, diplomacy, the established method of influencing the decisions and behaviors of foreign governments and peoples through dialogue, negotiation, and other measures short of war or violence. Modern diplomatic practices are a product of the post-Renaissance European state system. Historically, diplomacy has meant the conduct of official, usually bilateral, relations between sovereign states. I mean, this is essentially what we're talking about. That's essentially what this whole system is, and it's meant basically agreements between sovereign nations, as they discuss further down here, and it's between diplomats, basically, as we talk about diplomacy. Now, this means that's what you come out of your State Department. Now, your State Department should be doing this. Even your Director of National Security. This is national security, not intervention. Now, when we look at the idea of intervention should never be used, because as we get back to the idea of entangling alliances, and entangling alliances are essentially against the idea, and when they're pushing us to intervene. And essentially, they want peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations. They never says anything about intervening in anybody's affairs. They want us to basically, and even in Washington, he urges us to stay away from the affairs of Europe. This meant no intervention. These are two of our founding fathers. Now, if you're going to claim yourself as pro-American, as John Bolton tries to claim himself as not a neocon but pro-American, which we know he's a neocon and he's anti-American, we need to understand that you use diplomacy. And national security means you're securing the nation. Not the world, the nation, that's it. Just the nation. This means the United States and its territories. Just as simple as that. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. You could pretty much list the territories and the actual states on paper that you're and the other property on paper that you're actually responsible for. You're not responsible for the whole globe, and you do not need influence over those other areas. All you do is you basically negotiate back and forth to make sure that you have open dialogue with everyone, and that you basically can make sure that we can have essentially a friendly relationship with all nations around the globe. You don't have alliances with anyone. They never wanted an actual alliance with any other country, and that's why we should never have any allies at all. This is a big point, because what an ally does is it makes you beholden to their needs as well as they should be beholden to yours. It should be reciprocated, and in many cases you aren't guaranteed of that, and it can tie you into some very sticky situations that you do not as a country want to be beholden to, and that's where you get into some very bad situations when it comes to foreign policy, because it can be directly against the actual best interest of your nation, and this is what needs to be understood. And that's why you actually need to go, what's the best interest of your nation, not what's the best interest of some other country. And currently what's happening is we're seeing people in the government say, what's in the best interest of Israel, what's in the best interest of Saudi Arabia, what's in the best interest of NATO. Never what's in the best interest of the United States. This has never been discussed, and whenever somebody tries to bring this up, they say you're Islamophobic. You want Russia to take over the world because if you're against NATO. You're anti-Semitic if you start questioning our alliance with Israel, and this is what ends up happening. And they just want to shut down the conversation because of what this is, and they want to basically keep their system, which is against the actual way the founders wanted the relations between the U.S. on a global scale to run. Now, we were not supposed to be doing any of this. They never wanted any entangling alliances whatsoever. And when we start to look at our number of military bases, and we start to look at history, this is how empires collapse. You don't want to actually become an empire. You just want to run yourself as a country and be successful and be influential by your actual development as a country itself. You want people to copy you. You don't want to basically take them over. And you want to use diplomacy when relating to people. This is why we do this. And you do this through actual legitimate self-interest as a country, and understanding other countries going to have their own self-interest. Now when you see a socialist country like Venezuela or whatever, you don't intervene. No matter what the case, you do not intervene. If they've made a stupid decision, you don't intervene. And when people, and it just makes me laugh when people like Juan Guaido try to say, you don't want to bring socialism into your country. Well, this is a socialist saying you don't want to bring socialism in your country. Juan Guaido is a socialist. He's a socialist replacing another socialist. he is not exactly one to talk about socialism, because this is the system he believes in. He's only trying to play this little mask that he's not socialist so that he can continue to have the neocons behind him. He knows that if he actually showed his actual political ideology, which it's plain and simple to see, his political party is a bunch of progressives and socialists, if people actually saw that, they would actually realize, hey, this is not the guy that we thought we were actually behind. They would actually realize, hey, this guy's a scam artist. They would realize, and they would see that, hey, this guy is basically the only difference between him and Maduro is this guy is a complete and utter psychopath murderer, and loves people to die. So that's why this is why you don't do intervention, because you're going to get worse. It's basically the same idea of when we started to when we got rid of Gaddafi. Look exactly what came in. We got these Islamic militants. They were basically they were pretty much ISIS. That's what happens. You get rid of a person who's bad, and you're going to get worse. And that's what happens with intervention. And this is why our founders stated this specifically. They knew better than that. And if we actually understood that, we would have actually realized that this is completely backwards from actually what the founders actually envisioned. If the founders were basically still alive, they would have basically come into the actual White House over the last minimum three administrations, probably many more. And they'd be basically smacking him in the back of the head, telling him, you have everything wrong. Probably for at least the last, since the progressive era, probably smacking every one of them, maybe missing a couple of them in between. Because the fact is the way all of these people have run it is like a bunch of complete and utter morons. They go, we need a war on terror. Well, the fact is it's the same idea of when somebody loses a family member from that has been killed. The reason why we want the death penalty is because the fact is these people killed the family member. We want revenge, and that's the reason why. It's no different than out there. You kill loved ones, and guess what happens? That's the outcome that ends up occurring. Well, when we look at this one, they understood that there was terrorism back then. There's been terrorism since 1 AD, and they weren't stupid about it. They understood that basically don't intervene. Leave the stuff alone. Don't even bother with it, and only work on diplomacy. And that's why if we would actually follow that, you'll get some of the ideas from people like Rand Paul, people like Ron Paul, people like Thomas Massey, Justin Amash. But they're not listening to people like that because they'd rather listen to psychos like John Bolton, like little Marco Rubio, and other insane people like that. And you get people like Elliot Abrams and other crazy people like that have basically destroyed the idea of foreign policy. And mind you, that even people like Kissinger as well. I mean, Kissinger was the person that thoughts was one of the earlier ones that actually thought that this idea of regime, of just basically going in, busting in with regime change was a great idea, and supporting certain regimes over other regimes. He thought that Pol Pot was a great guy. Yeah, 300,000 people dead later with it. I think we have the outcome with that one as well. I think we can say that Pol Pot was not exactly a great guy, and that's supporting a socialist dictator. out there that was basically that slaughtered his own people to a level that basically and to a style that would have make Hitler lose his lunch. I think we can actually declare that Pol Pot was not exactly the greatest person out there. And Pol Pot's really right in the style of Juan Guaido. But we wanted to say that, oh, he's a good guy. And that was the case out there. And that this is what ends up happening with all these cases of we need to intervene. And this is what ends up happening, and we intervene and we end up causing all of these problems instead of just letting people dig their way out naturally. That's all we need to do. Let them dig their way out naturally and let the other countries mind their own business too. If they were that bright, they would do the same thing. This is why we have sovereignty. Sovereignty is the actual idea of respecting a country's borders and not violating them. And actually saying that they're free to choose their own leaders. Not saying, oh, we're going to anoint this guy because we like him better. And not even knowing their political system at all. Not realizing that basically the guy that you want is a worse socialist than actually the previous guy. And this is why when it comes to the actual system, our actual role should not be to dictate who gets to be what on a global scale. Our role should not be the global gods of the world. Our only role is to act in the best interest of the United States itself. That's it. It's very simple, and this is the whole idea that our founders had in the first place. And that should be respected, and we should be going back to that, not going to this idea that was a liberal foreign policy perspective that was embraced by people like Woodrow Wilson. If you like this, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, make sure you share it all the way around, and hopefully this is up within time so I can do a live stream after this. If not, the live stream will come probably before this, and that'll be just how it goes. Sometimes I can get these things through, sometimes I can't. Just depends on how everything works out. Bye, everyone.